Hello and welcome everyone. Hope you have had a very nice lunch. Um, Today we're going to talk about the EU Pay Transparency Directive. Can I get a thumbs up from everyone? Thank you. Thumbs up from everyone. Wow, I'm getting it already. It's awesome. Can I now get a thumbs up from everyone that have heard about the European Pay Transparency Directive? Yes, there we go. We have lots of thumbs up emojis. Lovely. You have heard about it. Great. Thank you for all of the love and engagement so early in the session. With the EU Pay Transparency Directive, you will be able to figure out what your colleagues earn. That is the most common misperception that I hear about the European Pay Transparency Directive. That is not exactly true. What is true, though, under the EU Pay Transparency Directive, employees will be able to request information for pay divided by gender of roles that are comparable to their own. And I argue that primarily this is not an exercise about reporting. This is not even primarily an exercise about data or structure or analysis. Primarily, this is an exercise about trust. And sometimes when I think about the work that we do under the EU Pay Transparency Directive, I think that maybe there is one woman out there somewhere in Europe that gets the pay that she deserves for the work that she does because of this directive. And maybe that means that there will be a more equal relationship between her and her husband. And maybe it means that they will share household responsibilities more equally at home. And maybe it means that the dad will stay at home with the children more often when they're sick. And maybe it's not one woman or one child or one family. Maybe there are millions. And what could it mean for our society if more children have more strong role models at home? That's why we should talk about pay, and more specifically about the EU Pay Transparency Directive. My name is Linnea Molin. I'm from Sysarb. We have 20 years of experience enabling fair and transparent pay with smart technology and expert services. We have about 700 clients and about 10,000 users across 60 countries. Myself, I have a background in compensation and benefits. So I started my career at Mercer, focusing on both comp and ben, but also driving the global mobility stream for the Nordics at Mercer. After that, I went to a Swedish-Norwegian consultancy firm focusing on international pension and insurance issues for international employees. After that, I was compensation and benefits manager at a fintech company called Klarna. And after that, I was driving the total reward stream for PwC in Sweden. Now I'm the Chief Advisory Officer at Sysarb, focusing on the transposition of the EU Pay Transparency Directive and how we can turn that into smart technology to make this exercise meaningful, easy, and compliant for the organizations out there tackling this right now. So let's have a quick look at the current state out there in Europe. We have 27 member states, and 19 of them are working on it when it comes to the transposition of the EU Pay Transparency Directive. 8 of those 19, actually, there are no official news at all on the progress. The rest We know that there is conversations going, maybe there is an expert or commission group that has been put on the work, so we know for sure that there is some progress. 11 of the 27 member states have published a draft, but none has fully transposed the directive today. And with the deadline being the 7th of June 2026, we are put in a situation which means a lot of time pressure for organizations. So actually, I would argue that we are put in somehow a moment, a catch 2022, where we need to prepare, but we don't know exactly what to prepare for. And my recommendation in this situation, both to keep stress levels down, hopefully to remain sanity, and also be pragmatic about this approach, is to keep two things in mind. The first one is that most likely member states will be late. We already have 5 examples of member states suggesting to postponing the deadline to the 1st of January this year, next year. And that is Sweden, Denmark, Ireland, Netherlands, and a very fresh one from yesterday, actually, Czech Republic are also suggesting to push the deadline. This is a trend that we see right now that I think we will see more of. It's not yet clear what it means from how the European Commission will respond to this, but it's definitely clear that member states are not ready. And it will also create a patchwork, so that's something to keep in mind. Some of them will transpose by June and some of them will likely transpose by January. So something to keep an eye out for if you are working for an international organization. The other thing that I would recommend to keep in mind right now is that in the directive, actually, a lot of the key obligations are already there. So we can already start preparing for the broad strokes to make sure that our projects around this do not end up in a time squeeze towards the end. The things that we know already now are, for example, that transparency towards candidate will come into play. You will, as an organization, need to present starter pay ranges or starter salaries for candidates one way or another. Whether you need to do that upfront or during the negotiation process may differ, but we know as a key element that this is something that we need to prepare for. The other thing that we know for sure is that employees will be able to request information on comparable roles divided by gender. And that's something that we can also start preparing for, even though we don't have all of the details on this yet. We also know that an analysis will be required if the gap is more than 5%, and we know that there is a reporting obligation coming into play. Now, in this situation of uncertainty, unclarity, a lot of change coming up, it's very natural to wonder, how are others doing? And how are they approaching this topic? So I prepared some stats. This is from a global study conducted by Mercer. They have surveyed 1,600 companies, and they have discovered that 77% of organizations are currently developing or have developed a pay transparency strategy. But only 9% of those have fully implemented it, looking at the European cut of the data. This means that organizations are not quite ready, just like the member states. Interesting also in this survey is that they have discovered that 90% of these organizations have compliance as a main driver for the projects around pay transparency strategy. Not surprisingly. I'm sure many of you listening are having the same main objective for this exercise. But something that I would like to highlight, I think is important to remember, in times of preparations for this directive, and of course it's important with the compliance, but research actually also show that employees who believe they are paid fairly are 85% more engaged and 60% more committed. So I argue that the organizations that are able to reap the positive effects of this directive are the ones that will run the fastest. And how do you get this? This is an exercise about trust. It's not an exercise about reporting. It's not an exercise about data. And this is the core of the directive that ultimately we need to get to. Trust takes clarity and consistency. And so if you are to focus on three main objectives for the rest of 2026 to be able to create that trust and to be able to reap all of those positive effects of this directive, what would they be, in my opinion? If I were to recommend you to focus on three things for the rest of this year, it would be to build a strong foundation for your organization's pay transparency journey, meaning define and align your organization's pay philosophy and practices. Structure your data, scrutinize material, discretionary pay elements more specifically. So there is a detail here. It's very easy to get stuck in the details. My recommendation would be to stick to a pragmatic approach when it comes to the data piece. Don't sweat the small things and focus on what is not standard. I will come back to this point later on. And third, this is something that is often underestimated, and there is a significant risk when it comes to the third one that we wait for all of the details. The third one is about engaging the key stakeholders to build a strong and consistent transparency story. And this takes time. You need to get your managers to be the frontliners to deliver that clarity and that consistency to give the foundation for trust in your organization, to be able to reap all of those positive benefits that comes from pay transparency. And this is something that takes time and preparation. So I will go through all of these one by one. And please write in the chat if you have any questions. I will try and take them agile during the presentation. First of all, define and align your organization's pay philosophy and practices. Human beings need to understand why. This is what will set us apart from robots and AI for all time, I think. Human beings will ask why. They will ask questions like, why is someone paid more than me? And the pay philosophy is providing that answer. And it needs to be there for managers to be able to provide that answer to all of the employees in a clear and consistent way. So the pay philosophy should define how pay levels are determined, what pay factors drive pay progression, what factors drive pay progression, and what objective criteria mean in practice. So it's a very important fundamental piece for this story to make sense and to feel genuine and to feel true for the employees. A clear pay philosophy also anchors pay decisions, the pay equity analysis, and the communication. So this is where it all starts. And I have a question, thank you so much. Are we obliged to disclose salary data for the same roles across different countries? For example, a role in Sweden compared to Poland? No, that's a good question. So the analysis is supposed to be per legal entity. So that will be the main point of both reporting and the analysis. When it comes to the actual pay, it needs to be consistent and fair across the whole organization. And it could be that an employee can actually have the right to compare him or herself even to someone that is not employed at the same time as him or her. So it goes very broad in terms of how comparisons can be made, and how far you have to be able to defend your pay decisions as an employer. But to be simplifying, the main element for the analysis and for the reporting most likely will circle around the legal entity. In some cases, if you have a very centralized organization, it could be single source of a single source that defines the reporting and the analysis. But for most, it will be the legal entity. Thank you for the question. So we are defining a why. We are able to anchor pay decisions, how pay levels are set, what factors drive pay progression, etc. in our organization. That's great. The next thing that we need to focus on is to structure the data and scrutinize material and discretionary pay elements. So here, one of the main blockers that we see is that organizations wait for perfect data before they start. And my recommendation would be to start with what is already reliable and where discrimination could actually be hidden. So many times the definition of pay is very broad under the directive, so I don't blame anyone out there. But I see my clients spend a lot of time and a lot of energy on trying to evaluate the value of each and every benefit. And we have limited time and we have limited energy. So my recommendation would be to focus right here and right now for 2026, focus on what is actually may drive pay differences. So that could, for example, be benefits that are available to some of these elements are not driving pay differences, such as benefits that are available to everyone, flexible benefits chosen by employees, for example, or it could be standard allowances that are applied uniformly. What could drive pay differences and discrimination, and where you most likely need to have more control as an employer to feel safe from a compliance perspective, are discretionary bonuses, manager-driven allowances, or off-cycle adjustments. The data that is reliable is also often the fixed pay. So given the situation we're in, with a lot of uncertainty, with limited time, with the need to prepare right here and right now, my recommendation would be to focus on what is reliable and where pay differences could actually lead to discrimination. Perfection can come later. It will be required to report on a very wide definition of pay in the future. But it's also good to remember that the reporting exercise is not until next year. Last but not least, engage key stakeholders to build a strong, consistent pay transparency story. I often say that what you need to do is to make sure that your managers are singing the same song. It is essential for trust because that's where clarity and consistency comes. The manager will be the frontliners. And if they are supposed to sing the same song, they need to practice. And this takes time. So my recommendation would be to not wait for all of the details to be in place. Don't wait for the perfect data set to be in place. Start now with the broad strokes so that key stakeholders, managers are in line with what the organization want with this initiative, what it means for them. You have them start preparing, start practicing for these conversations, because pay transparency will change the nature of conversations around pay. All of a sudden, now employees will be more likely to ask questions such as how pay decisions are made, how my pay compared to others. Up until this directive, at least from my perspective, from a compensation and benefits perspective, the when you train managers to talk about salary and pay, the recommendation number one has always been, do not talk about pay compared to others when you speak to an employee. Focus on that person, focus on that person's pay, that person's situation. Don't take that perspective of what is he and her earning. Now, all of this is turning itself on its head, and manager need time to prepare, to practice for this. And it's essential for the story and the message to come out to the organization in a clear and consistent way. So preparations, they require leadership alignment, they require manager capability, and it requires clear messaging. And I have a question. Thank you. What applies regarding the reporting obligation to the Equality Ombudsman? In Sweden, it's Diskrimineringsombudsmannen. If a company group has more than 250 employees, is reporting required annually, or does this threshold apply per legal entity? It applies per legal entity. And I did see also I have more questions in the Q&A section. Thank you for that. How do we maintain anonymity in smaller organizations with one-off roles? There we go. Thank you so much. It's going to differ in different countries. So if we take Sweden as an example, it is clearly stated in the latest draft that small groups will not be hindering employers to relieve data. So in the extreme example, an individual's pay could be it could be what's the word open to the colleague, so you could actually figure out what your colleagues, a specific colleague, earn. To my point in the beginning, it can be true actually. This will differ. So we have another suggestion from Denmark, for example. In their draft, they suggest that it needs to be, I think it's 6 or 8, something like that, individuals in one group or one gender for data to be relieved, to be open. And there is also a clause in the directive that allows member state to say that if it is a very small organization, a very small group, the information could be handed to, for example, the unions or a third party that gets to see the actual numbers, but then advise the employee on whether it sounds like or looks like it's he or she should take the question further, whether it seems to be unequal pay in this specific case. Great, thank you. We have one more question. Have you heard anything about the delay in implementation of the EU Pay Transparency Directive in Sweden? The last thing I've heard is that the new suggested date is the 1st of January. Today, they were supposed to release a proposition to as a part of the standard process. From the beginning, it was supposed to be transposed by the 1st of July. Now it's 1st of January next year. The proposition is not, I haven't seen it yet, so I'm not sure if it means that the whole process is being delayed. But I will keep looking for it during the afternoon. Whether this will be accepted by the European Commission, whether there will be any fines for Sweden or other member states is unknown at this point. What are the biggest challenges organizations face with the EU Pay Transparency Directive? Thank you for good questions, all of you. The biggest challenge, I think, right now is the fact that we lack information, we lack the details. The national transpositions are very delayed. So we are in a situation, or a lot of organizations are in a situation where they really want to prepare, but they feel they don't know exactly what to prepare for. And that is putting a lot of stress on organizations. That is right here and right now. I think if we fast forward 6 months, the biggest challenges will be just that question of trust, to be able to own the narrative and build trust out of this, to turn this into an opportunity to reap the positive effects that you can get if you manage to be clear and consistent in your messaging around pay transparency and how pay is set in your organization. You can actually get much more engagement, much more commitment from your employees. So I would argue that is that should be the main focus with the work around pay transparency, how to make sure that you get to reap those positive effects, because this is coming and it's reality. And we just need to make sure to do something great out of it. Super. That was all of the questions answered. So without further ado, I would like to leave you with two things. Delays or not, two things are clear. Transparency will be required and trust will be earned. The winners, I argue, are the ones that are able to create that commitment and that engagement and turn the Pay Transparency Directive to something very positive for your organization. Thank you so much. Thank you.